It was March 14, 1975, at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. John Lennon was sitting in a burgundy velvet chair, facing 7 journalists from major American publications. Rolling Stone, Time, the New York Times. They were all there, notebooks open, tape recorders running, waiting to capture every word from the man who had just emerged from what the press called his lost weekend. The interview had been going for nearly an hour. John was relaxed, almost too relaxed. He was talking about his reconciliation with Yoko, about fatherhood, about leaving the chaos of Los Angeles behind and returning to New York to become, as he put it, a human being again. "I've realized something these past few months," John was saying, his Liverpool accent still thick after all these years in America. "Fame doesn't mean anything if you can't look at yourself in the mirror, if you can't be honest about who you are and what you've done." The reporters were scribbling furiously. This was gold. John Lennon being vulnerable, reflective, almost philosophical. Then the phone rang. Not one of the reporters' phones. This was 1975, before cell phones, before the constant digital interruptions we know today. This was the hotel room's landline, an old-fashioned rotary phone sitting on a side table near the window overlooking Central Park. John stopped mid-sentence. His publicist, a nervous young woman named Sarah Chen, looked panicked. The interview was supposed to be uninterrupted. No calls. Those were the rules. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said, standing quickly. "I'll tell them to call back." But John held up his hand. Something in his expression had changed. The casual, confident rock star had disappeared, replaced by something else. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. "No," John said quietly, "I'll take it." The room fell silent. 7 reporters watched as John Lennon stood and walked to the phone like a man approaching the gallows. He picked up the receiver. "Hello?" What happened next would become one of the most talked-about moments in rock and roll journalism. But nobody in that room, not even John himself, was prepared for what was about to unfold. "Dad?" The word hung in the air like smoke. John's entire body went rigid. His hand gripped the phone so tightly, his knuckles turned white. "Julian?" The reporters exchanged glances. Julian Lennon, John's first son, from his marriage to Cynthia. The boy he'd left behind in England when the Beatles exploded into global superstardom. The child who grew up with a father who was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. John turned his back to the room, facing the window. But his voice, breaking slightly, carried clearly through the suite. "Jules, how did you get this number?" "Uncle Paul gave it to me," came the young voice through the receiver. Julian was 12 years old. His voice was changing, caught between boyhood and adolescence. "He said you were doing interviews today." "He said maybe you'd want to hear from me." Paul McCartney. Even after the bitter dissolution of the Beatles, after all the lawsuits and the public feuds, Paul was still looking out for John's son. Maybe in ways John hadn't been. "Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact." John didn't speak for what felt like forever. The reporters could see his shoulders rising and falling, his breathing becoming heavier. "Jules, this isn't really a good time, son. I'm in the middle of something." "I know. Uncle Paul told me. He said you were talking about being a better father now, about starting over." The words hit John like a physical blow. Sarah Chen, the publicist, looked like she wanted to disappear into the carpet. The reporters sat frozen, witnessing something they knew was deeply personal, but unable to look away. "Paul told you that?" John's voice was barely above a whisper. "He plays me your interviews sometimes, the ones on the radio. He says I should know who my father really is, not just what the newspapers say. John turned slightly, just enough that the reporters could see his profile. Tears were streaming down his face. John Lennon, the sharp-tongued wit who had faced down the British press, who had challenged governments, who had stood up to death threats, was crying in front of 7 strangers. Jules, I don't know what to say to you right now. You don't have to say anything, Dad. I just wanted to hear your voice. Mom says I shouldn't bother you, that you have a new life now. But I thought maybe you'd want to hear from me, even just for a minute. What happened next shocked everyone in that room. Instead of ending the call, instead of promising to ring back later, John Lennon did something he'd never done before in any interview, in any public setting. He invited his son into the conversation. Jules, John said, his voice steadier now. I'm here with some reporters. We're doing an interview. Would you like to talk to them? Tell them about yourself? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Really? Julian finally asked, his young voice full of disbelief. Really? I think it's time people heard from you, not just about me, but about you, who you are, what you care about. John turned back to face the room. His eyes were red, his famous face vulnerable in a way none of them had ever seen. Gentlemen, lady, he addressed the reporters, I'd like you to meet my son, Julian. He's going to join us for the rest of this interview, if that's all right with all of you. Sarah Chen quickly grabbed a speaker attachment from her briefcase, something normally used for conference calls. Within moments, Julian's voice was filling the Plaza Hotel suite, clear enough for everyone to hear. Hello, Julian said shyly. I'm Julian Lennon. I'm 12 years old, and I live in England with my mom. The reporters, seasoned professionals who'd interviewed presidents and criminals, rock stars and revolutionaries, found themselves at a loss for words. Finally, Barbara Morrison from Rolling Stone spoke up. Julian, this is Barbara Morrison from Rolling Stone magazine. Can I ask you a question? Yes, ma'am. What's it like being John Lennon's son? The question hung in the air. John, still standing by the phone, closed his eyes. This was the question he'd been afraid of his whole life. The question he'd run from, hidden from, pretended didn't exist. Honestly? Julian's voice came through, clearer now, more confident. Most of the time, it's confusing. Everyone knows my dad. They've got posters of him, records, magazines, but I don't really know him. Not the way other kids know their fathers. John's legs seemed to give out. He sank into the nearest chair, his head in his hands. When I was little, Julian continued, and you could hear him gaining courage with each word. I used to tell kids at school that my dad was too busy changing the world to come to my birthday parties. I thought that sounded better than admitting he just didn't come. Julian, John started, but his son kept talking. But Uncle Paul explained it to me. He said Dad was fighting his own battles, that sometimes grown-ups get so lost in their own pain that they forget other people are hurting too. He said it wasn't about me, that Dad loved me, even if he didn't know how to show it. Robert Chen from Time magazine leaned forward. Julian, do you believe that? Do you believe your father loves you? The question seemed to echo through the room, through the phone line, through the years of absence and silence. I want to, Julian said simply. I really, really want to. John Lennon stood up abruptly. He walked back to the phone, picked up the receiver, even though the speaker was still on, as if he needed that physical connection. Jules, I need to tell you something. Right here, right now, with all these people listening. I need you to hear this, and I need them to hear it too, so I can't take it back, so I can't pretend I never said it. The reporters leaned in, pens hovering over notebooks. Go on, Dad, Julian whispered. I've been a terrible father to you. Not just absent, not just busy. Terrible. I made excuses. I blamed the Beatles, blamed your mother, blamed the press, blamed the world. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of being a father because mine was so awful. Scared of failing you the way he failed me. And in being scared, I did exactly what I was afraid of. I failed you anyway." The room was completely silent, except for John's voice and the faint sound of Julian breathing on the other end of the line. "When you were born, Jules, I held you for about 10 minutes. Then I handed you to your mom and I walked out of that hospital room. And I've been walking away ever since. Even when I was in the same house, even when I was in the same country, I was walking away." Barbara Moyeson from Rolling Stone was crying. She didn't try to hide it. "But I'm done walking, Jules. I'm done running. I don't know how to be the father you deserve, but I want to learn. If you'll let me, if it's not too late." "It's not too late," Julian said immediately, his voice breaking. "Dad, it's not too late." What followed was unlike any interview any of those reporters had ever witnessed. For the next 2 hours, John Lennon and his 12-year-old son talked, really talked, about everything John had missed. Julian's first day of school, his first guitar, his struggles with dyslexia, his love of drawing. "I draw a lot," Julian was saying. "Mum says I get it from you. She showed me some of your drawings from when you were young." "You draw?" John asked, and there was genuine wonder in his voice. "What do you draw?" "Mostly landscapes, forests and mountains, places I'd like to go someday. Uncle Paul says they're quite good." "Paul's seen your drawings?" "He comes by every few weeks, takes me to football matches, helps me with my homework sometimes. He's—" Julian paused, choosing his words carefully. "He's been really kind to me." The statement landed like a bomb in the room. Everyone there knew about the Lennon-McCartney feud, the lawsuits over the Beatles' breakup, the bitter public statements. And here was John's son, quietly revealing that Paul McCartney had been more of a father to him than his own dad. John was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Paul's a good man, better than me in a lot of ways. I'm glad he's been there for you." Michael Torres from the New York Times cleared his throat. "John, if I may, this is clearly a very personal conversation. Are you sure you want us here for this?" John looked at the reporter, then at all of them, his eyes fierce despite the tears. "Yes, I want you here. I want you to write every word of this down. I want the whole world to know what I've done and what I'm going to do differently. Because if I say it here in front of all of you, then I have to mean it. I have to follow through." He turned back to the phone. "Jules, I have a question for you, and I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that?" "Yes, Dad." "Do you want me to be part of your life? Really part of it? Because if you say no, I'll understand. I'll understand if you're better off without me." The reporters held their breath. "I want you to be my dad," Julian said, and you could hear him crying now. "I've always wanted that, even when I was angry at you, even when I told Mom I didn't care if I ever saw you again. I wanted it. I just didn't think you wanted it." John Lennon broke down completely. His whole body shook with sobs. Sarah Chen moved to comfort him, but Barbara Morrison stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. This needed to happen. This needed to be witnessed. "I want it, Jules," John managed to say through his tears. "God help me. I want it so much. I just don't know how." "We'll figure it out," Julian said, his young voice suddenly sounding older, wiser. "Uncle Paul says the best things are worth working for. Maybe this is one of those things." Robert Chen from Time spoke up, his own voice emotional. "Julian, can I ask you something? You keep mentioning Paul McCartney. Has he talked to you about your father?" "All the time," Julian said. "He tells me stories about when they were young before the Beatles. He says Dad was the bravest person he ever knew, that he wasn't afraid of anything or anyone, that he made music that changed the world because he believed in it so completely." John looked up, surprised. "Uncle Paul says Dad's not perfect, that nobody is, but that he's real, that everything he does, he means it. Even his mistakes, they're honest mistakes. And he says that's worth more than anything, The afternoon light was fading through the Plaza Hotel windows, casting long shadows across the room. John had been talking with Julian for over 2 hours now, and the interview had transformed into something none of them had anticipated. Jennifer Santos from Newsweek, who had been mostly quiet until now, leaned forward. "John, Julian, if I may, I think there's something we need to address." "Julian, you mentioned being angry at your father. Can you tell us about that?" John stiffened. "Jennifer, I don't think." "It's okay, Dad," Julian interrupted. "I can talk about it." The 12-year-old took a breath, and when he spoke, there was a pain in his voice that belied his young years. "There was this one Christmas. I was 7. Mom had told me Dad probably wouldn't come because he was in America. But I kept hoping anyway. I sat by the window all day, watching for his car. Mom made a special dinner, and I wouldn't eat until after dark because I kept thinking he might still come." John stood up abruptly and walked back to the window, his back to everyone. "He didn't come," Julian continued, "but the next day I saw a photo in the newspaper. Dad was at some Christmas party in New York with lots of famous people. He was smiling and laughing. And I remember thinking, he's not too busy. He just doesn't want to be with me. Jules." John's voice was barely audible. "I kept that newspaper clipping for 2 years. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself not to hope anymore. Uncle Paul found it when he was helping me clean my room last year. He sat with me for a long time, and we talked about it. He cried with me, and then he told me something I'll never forget." The reporters waited. "He said that sometimes people are so broken inside that they can't see what they're breaking around them. That Dad was running from his own childhood, his own pain. And he was running so hard that he couldn't stop long enough to see me standing there." Barbara Morrison was openly weeping now, and she wasn't alone. "Uncle Paul said it wasn't my fault. That there was nothing wrong with me. That Dad was just lost. And that maybe someday he'd find his way back." John turned around, his face devastated. "I saw that photo, Jules. The one you're talking about. I was at that party, and I was smiling, but I was miserable. I was drunk. I was angry at everyone and everything. And I knew you were in England probably wondering why I wasn't there. But I couldn't face it. I couldn't face you." "Why, Dad?" Julian asked, and the simple question held years of hurt. "Because every time I looked at you, I saw every way I was failing. You deserved a father who was present, who was stable, who could show you how to be a man. And I was none of those things. I was a mess. I'm still a mess." Michael Torres spoke up. "John, with respect, isn't that exactly when a child needs their father most? When they're imperfect and human?" John laughed bitterly. "You'd think a man who wrote songs about truth and peace and love would understand that, wouldn't you? But I didn't. I thought I had to be perfect to be your father, Jules. And since I knew I couldn't be perfect, I just stayed away." "But Dad," Julian said, "I never needed you to be perfect. I just needed you to be there." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Robert Chen asked quietly, "Julian, did you ever tell your father this, before today?" "I tried once. I wrote him a letter when I was 9. It took me 3 weeks to write it because my dyslexia makes writing really hard. I told him about school and about learning guitar and about how I missed him. I asked him if maybe he could visit sometime." "Did he write back?" Jennifer Santos asked. "He sent a telegram 2 months later. It said, 'Sorry, busy with new album. We'll try to visit soon. Love, John.' That was it." John's face crumbled. "I remember that letter. You told me about learning Norwegian wood on guitar. You said it was hard, but you were practicing every day. You drew a picture of us playing music together. You remember?" Julian sounded shocked. "I remember every word. I kept it. I still have it. I've read it 100 times, Jules. 1,000 times." "Then why didn't you come?" The question everyone had been thinking, but no one dared ask. John walked back to the chair and sat down heavily. When he spoke, his voice was raw, stripped of all pretense. "Because I'm a coward, Jules. Because facing you meant facing what I'd done. It meant admitting that I chose fame over you, that I chose my career over being your father. And I couldn't do it. Every time I thought about getting on a plane to see you, I'd panic. I'd think about all the years I'd missed, all the birthdays and Christmases and ordinary days. And the weight of it was so crushing that I just shut down. Sarah Chen glanced at her watch. It was nearly 6 p.m. The interview had been scheduled for 1 hour. They were approaching 4. "John," she said gently, "we should probably—" "No," John said firmly, "we're not done. Jules, are you still there?" "I'm here, Dad. I need to tell you something. Something I've never admitted to anyone, not even Yoko. Will you listen?" "Of course." John took a deep breath. "When you were born, Jules, I was 22 years old. The Beatles were exploding. We were becoming bigger than anything anyone had ever seen, and I was terrified. Not of the fame, but of you, of being responsible for another human being when I could barely take care of myself." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My own father left when I was 5, just walked out and never came back. My mom gave me to my Aunt Mimi because she couldn't handle raising me. And then, when I was 17, when Mom and I were finally building a relationship, she was killed, hit by a car driven by an off-duty cop who'd been drinking." The reporters were riveted. This was John Lennon's history, but he'd never spoken about it so openly, so vulnerably. "So when I held you for the first time, this tiny, perfect thing that I'd helped create, all I could think was that I was going to ruin you, that I was going to abandon you like my father abandoned me, that I was going to fail you like my mother failed me. And I was so scared of becoming them that I became exactly what I feared." Julian was quiet on the other end of the line. "I know that's not an excuse," John continued. "I'm not asking you to forgive me or to understand. I'm just trying to explain why a man who wrote 'All You Need Is Love' couldn't show love to his own son." "Dad," Julian said softly, "Uncle Paul told me about your mom, about how she died. He said you never really got over it." "Paul told you that? He tells me lots of things about you. He says you're harder on yourself than anyone else could ever be, that you expect yourself to be perfect even though you write songs about accepting imperfection." John shook his head in wonder. Paul "Bloody McCartney, still trying to save me after all these years. Barbara Morrison spoke up, her voice gentle. "John, Julian, I'm watching something extraordinary happen here. You're doing in real time what most fathers and sons take years of therapy to accomplish. You're being honest with each other." "Uncle Paul said something else," Julian continued. "He said that Dad and him, they were like brothers, that they understood each other in ways nobody else could, and that when the Beatles ended, Dad lost more than a band. He lost his best friend." John's expression shifted to something complicated. Grief mixed with regret, love tangled with pain. "Paul and I," John started, then stopped. "We haven't really spoken in years. Not meaningfully. We communicate through lawyers mostly. It's been easier to stay angry than to admit how much I miss him." "He misses you too," Julian said. "He won't say it directly, but I can tell. When he talks about the old days, about writing songs with you in his living room or yours, his whole face lights up, and then he gets quiet and sad." Michael Torres leaned forward. "John, are you saying that Paul McCartney has been maintaining a relationship with your son while you've been estranged from both of them?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm saying that Paul is a better man than me. He could have turned Julian against me. He could have used my absence to make himself look good. Instead, he's been building bridges, keeping my son connected to me even when I wasn't doing it myself." Jennifer Santos asked, "Julian, why do you think Paul has done this for you?" "Because he loves my dad," Julian said simply. "He told me once that you don't stop loving someone just because they hurt you. That real love means staying even when it's hard." The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. They were John stood up and walked to the phone again. "Jules, I want to make you a promise. Right here, with all these people listening. But before I do, I need to ask you something. Can you forgive me? Not right now, maybe, but someday. Julian's answer came quickly. Dad, I already have. I forgave you a long time ago. Uncle Paul taught me that holding on to anger only hurts yourself. I don't want to hurt anymore. I just want a dad. John's shoulders shook with sobs. Then here's my promise. Starting today, I'm going to be your father. Not the perfect father, but a real one. I'm going to call you every week. I'm going to visit you in England. I'm going to learn about your life, your dreams, your fears. I'm going to show up, Jules. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Do you mean it? Julian's voice was hopeful but cautious. I swear it, and everyone here is my witness. If I break this promise, they can print it in every newspaper in the world. Let everyone know that John Lennon is a liar, as well as a terrible father. Robert Chen spoke up. John, I don't think public shaming is the— I need the accountability, John interrupted. I've spent my whole life making promises I didn't keep. This is different. This has to be different. The sun had fully set now, casting the Plaza Hotel suite in amber twilight. Sarah Chen had long ago stopped trying to end the interview. What was happening here was bigger than any scheduled appointment. Barbara Morrison asked one final question. Julian, what do you want to say to your father right now? If you could say anything in the world. Julian was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was clear and sure. Dad, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not because you're famous or because you made great music. I'm proud of you for crying today, for being honest, for being scared and doing this anyway. That takes more courage than anything else you've ever done. John sat down, overwhelmed. And I want you to know something else. You're not your father. You're not your mother. You're John Lennon, and you're my dad. And that's enough. That's always been enough. I just needed you to believe it too. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the hotel manager, who had quietly slipped in an hour ago to see what was taking so long, was standing in the corner, wiping tears from his face. I love you, Jules, John said. I should have said that more. I should have said it every day. But I'm saying it now. I love you so much it scares me. I love you too, Dad. Jules, I need to go now, but I'm going to call you tomorrow. Not in a month, not when I have time. Tomorrow. Is that okay? That's more than okay. And Jules, tell Paul thank you. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I miss him. Why don't you tell him yourself, Dad? John laughed through his tears. You're right. You're absolutely right. I'll call him too. As they said their goodbyes, as Julian's voice faded from the speaker, the reporters sat in stunned silence. They'd come for a standard celebrity interview. They'd witnessed a father and son finding each other again. John turned to face them, his face streaked with tears, his famous composure completely gone. I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking, this is a great story. John Lennon, the genius songwriter, can't even manage a relationship with his own kid. And you'd be right. It is a great story. But not because it's about me. It's a great story because it's about what happens when you finally stop running. He paused, looking at each reporter in turn. I've spent my whole life writing songs about love and peace and coming together. But I couldn't even show up for my own son's birthday. You want to write about the real John Lennon? Write about that. Write about the distance between who we want to be and who we actually are. Write about how hard it is to be honest, to be vulnerable, to admit you failed. Michael Torres spoke up. John, what changed today? What made you finally able to have this conversation? John thought for a moment. Julian called. That's what changed. He reached out even though I'd given him every reason not to. He showed me more courage in that one phone call than I've shown in 12 years. And I realized something. If my 12-year-old son can be that brave, then what excuse do I have? Barbara Morrison asked, what happens now? Now I become the father I should have been all along. Now I stop making excuses. Now I do the hardest work of my life, which is showing up every day and being present. Not the rock star, not the legend, just Dad. And Paul McCartney? Jennifer Santos asked. John smiled, a real smile this time. Paul's been more of a father to my son than I have. That's a debt I can never repay. But I can start by being honest with him too, by telling him that I'm sorry, that I miss him, that I love him. All the things I've been too proud and too scared to say. As the reporters packed up their equipment, as Sarah Chen finally breathed a sigh of relief that this extraordinary day was ending, John sat quietly by the window, looking out at Central Park. Robert Chen approached him before leaving. "John, that was the most honest interview I've ever conducted. Thank you for letting us be part of it." John nodded. "Thank you for witnessing it. Now I have to follow through. Now I have to be the man I said I'd be. Do you think you can do it?" John looked out at the darkening sky, at the lights beginning to glow in windows across the city. "I have to. Because somewhere in England, a 12-year-old boy is going to sleep tonight believing his father loves him. And I'll be damned if I'm going to prove him wrong." The interview was published in pieces across multiple magazines over the following weeks. But more importantly, it changed the trajectory of John Lennon's life. True to his word, John called Julian the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Within a month, he flew to England to spend a week with his son. They were awkward at first, two people learning how to be father and son, but they tried. Every day, they tried. John also called Paul McCartney. Their conversation lasted 4 hours and ended with both men in tears. It wouldn't repair their relationship overnight, but it was a beginning. The reporters who witnessed that day would later say it was the most important story they ever covered, not because of who John Lennon was, but because of what he became, a man willing to face his failures and try to do better. Julian Lennon would later say in interviews that March 14, 1975, was the day he got his father back. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. And John learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is answer the phone when it rings, even when you're scared, especially when you're scared, because on the other end might be the voice that changes everything. If this incredible story of redemption and fatherhood moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of second chances and honest conversation. Have you ever had a moment where honesty changed everything in a relationship? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the human moments behind music's greatest legends.